Up. Well, welcome to Fearology Group, study group. This is a group of people that have been together for several months. Some of us going back to the first course I taught on understanding fear and its effect on humanity for one of the elder colleges here out on Vancouver Island. Some of the people joined later, a couple here from a second course that I taught. This is a course that I had put out basically to increase the amount of dialogue that a human society, social group could actually have on fear as one of the focal topics. Well, it's an experiment, folks, and the course was an experiment, and all of the people along are all the guinea pigs that you're watching that are left over from the experiment, and they're still with us. And are they conditioned? Are they conditioned to the cult of Michael Fisher's view and theory about fear? Well, what I have found is they are very challenging, and they have very good challenging ideas for me and theories for me. And we love to read, we love to think, and we're not too uninterested in talking about fear. So welcome to today's program. It's Fear Talk number 29 of a series. I'm just going to leave it over to us. We started the discussion really briefly. We can go anywhere we want, which is we typically do. I don't really facilitate totally this group. The group facilitates itself. So that's just a little encore about how we actually do this. And really, the idea we got into was fear of death and its importance in shaping the world. And an author that we were looking at that I sent out a prompt for was mindful or radical mindfulness. And basically the author arguing, based on quite a large study of different literatures, East, West, psychology, sociology, spirituality, feminist, Buddhist thought, that basically until humans are able to really come to terms with death and that constant pull of a fear of death that mostly we're unconscious of, I think the argument basically is we're not probably going to make a lot of change in the world. And so then we were talking about earlier as we were warming up today, what is change and what is the different levels of awareness we could have of change to actually master change in some ways, even though we can't control all change. So those are just a few little insights for the beginning. But you at one point, and I know, let's start right there. We started with what is death? And that's a good one, Jim. You know, I'm going to just throw my hat in on it. It's probably all of the things from death of culture, death of ideas, death of worldviews, death of uh, ethnocentric identities or personal identities, death of obviously lost or valuable ones that are to us, close to us. And I think if we look at death that way, it starts to really all come down to, and I'm just going to coagulate this, a fear of change.
Yes.
Which kind of gets back to where we started the discussion on change. So there's a few pieces and bits. Just jump in, folks, as usual.
Well, fear of change and not coming back. So fear of loss of existence forever. I think that's the fear. Fear of loss of your type of work or your identity forever. I think there's a sort of a terror we have in leaving what we think we can't come back to, which is a fear of, yeah, and of of a finite, of a stopping of what we know. So that's kind of cool though, because then you can get reborn. Then ideas can get reborn only if they have a chance to completely die first, which is what you're talking about. Change has to be multi-level, right?
So if we don't have the idea of the reborn, I'm curious, or even of that possible vision of a reborn, um, what do you think happens to people? What happens to you if you're stuck in that place maybe of just fear of losing what you've already all known and that doesn't seem to have anywhere to go, right? It's like it's just a complete loss. What happens to people when they're in that lived experience of that fear?
Pretty terrifying. But I think you just have to sit with it. At least that was my experience.
What does that mean to sit with it?
Well, I think the more I had a terrifying experience a while back, but I think the more you are horrified of that, or reflecting on that experience and how horrifying it is, and you're out of control, just like when you climb and you're out of control. It's terrifying, and it's circular, and it falls on itself, and it goes worse and worse. But if you just sit with it and not try to change it, and just look at it without trying to react to it, just say, okay, yeah, that feels, or you can see how that feels kind of awful, and that feels kind of this and that, like a meditative sort of reflection of it, it changes.
And this comes from somebody who climbs mountains. So you're in a foothold and a handhold or two, and then you might start having this experience of, oh, what have I got
Yeah,
myself into?
yeah, yeah, yeah.
So you don't make so good decisions, I guess, is one summary. When you're gripping, right? Gripping something
Mhm.
to get, to hold,
And
to
you're catastrophizing. This
catastrophizing.
might happen next. I might die. I might die.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And so
basic.
but you want to hang on to everything you know, right?
Yes,
You can secure,
yes. Not leaving here. Yeah.
right?
If I
But
hold on tight, nothing will change. But of course it will, because you
yeah,
can't stay there. Yeah.
okay, there's an interesting philosophy, isn't it? See, it won't stay there anyway.
Mm-mm.
What you're gripping, what you're holding to, what you're clinging to, it won't stay there anyway. So that's quite the philosophy. I think that's a kind of radical mindfulness, don't you think?
Uh, yeah. It's a opening to change, I think. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
the basic
Well,
It
idea
would sure
of the
focus your
impermanence.
attention.
Go ahead.
sorry.
Yeah, it would sure focus your attention in the moment if you are you basically have to focus on getting down or doing the next thing without really thinking about it. So it means if you're in a matter of life and death in that moment, you have to be focused on whatever the next step is, rather than being focused on the awfulizing and the catastrophizing. You have to be focused to get
Yeah.
down.
Well, if you're not, you fall. If you catastrophize, you
Yeah,
fall. I've had both experiences. So,
yeah.
So what kind of focus? Focus can mean a lot of different things, right? What's a, let's say, a good kind of focus in a situation like that? What's maybe not so good a kind of focus?
well, catastrophizing is focus on the potential of the worst outcome.
The future.
But focus that you want is what's possibly the next move. Where do I need to put my foot? Like very, very specific, small focus on the very next thing. But I was actually kind of referring more though to an experience I had in a yoga teacher training when I had gone off, the long story, gone off my antidepressants too fast and started to have like psychotic episodes there. And yeah, I had this horrible dream, which was basically made me feel like there was no hope. It was the end of the world. It was horrible. This deer kept on being sucked down this hole, and I was trying to rescue it. And it was just so sad and hopeless. And I woke up from that just like terrified. As I never have been before. It was really weird.
Yeah.
Um, and the whole rest of the course, I was just kind of faking it, trying to make my way through. And finally, it took me a couple of months to really just start witnessing and being okay with, this is how I am right now.
Okay.
This is how I am right now. I don't know why. So yeah,
Yeah.
it was that kind of a sort of a psychological feeling, like you're misstepping psychologically into a place you don't want to be, but you can't get out, and you don't fit into anyone's world. You feel like you don't. But it was only accepting it. Mind you, I did go back on meds too,
Yeah.
but just saying. But yeah, it was only accepting it that allowed me to to start to just be okay for a minute, if that makes any sense.
Mhm. Thanks.
I think in my 20s, 30s, and 40s, age-wise, there was very little thinking about death or fear of death, unless there was a specific incident that happened that was very dangerous, which I did have a couple. One was on a motorcycle, and another one was on a bridge. And but other than that, I think it was a time of finding out what is my goal in life, what is the purpose of my life, and when I was thinking about it, and not just doing activities, which were very important to the family, but fear of death. I find that a difficult concept to relate to. I suppose if I'd been a soldier, American soldier in Vietnam, it would have that fear would have started very early, maybe at the age of 18 or 20 or something, when I was enlisted in the army. But other than that, life, we look for stability as human beings, and maybe the idea of change and the idea of stability don't quite adhere to each other. And I'm wondering if our human being age has something to do with that feeling that is that change is important. And I do agree with what people are saying, that we do need a new consciousness, and it is important for us older folk to start looking, and the younger people too. And I don't know about young kids at school, but I think that a change of consciousness in what we are doing here on this planet is going to be extremely important. I think people are becoming more and more aware of the necessity to think of a strong change of consciousness about their lives on this planet. Sometimes I wonder if just living on this planet and doing our physical goals, like paying for a house and raising a family and so on, is that the end of life when that stops? I'm thinking of, as I'm an older person, that when I do pass away, I would like my ashes to be not buried 2 feet down or 4 feet down. I'd like them to be on the surface of the earth and be part of new growth that is coming up, for example, in a forest or on a field, but not in a metal cask down in the earth that's going to stay there for thousands of years. I've been regrowth, and I think that regrowth, if we have a planet, regrowth is something that is important to me.
It's another type of rebirth, isn't it? You can think of rebirth in different metaphors, different ideas, but also different reality or phenomenal possibilities.
One wonders how the death rituals we have now came about why we bury people 6 feet under, why we have the elaborate funeral events. What I know, things happened in Egypt and all of that, and they put people, mummified them, put them in sarcophaguses and kept them forever and all of that. But why? Why did that happen? Why did we move away as human beings from a natural birth and death cycle of ashes to ashes, dust to dust? What happened to make the funeral industry such a profit-making thing that it is now? Like, where did it happen? Where did it start? Like the rituals in I think it's Buddhist tradition or Hindu tradition of burning people, the corpses, and the going back to the air seems to make a whole lot of sense, because you don't have the additional problem of storing all these coffins somewhere and taking up huge tracts of land for cemeteries. It boggles the mind on why funerals and burials and graveyards happened in the first place. It just does. Does anybody have any insight into why we do these things?
Money.
Yeah, money.
Because,
No,
and
it's not money, because, you know, thousands of years ago they were burying people in caves. You know, it's the Neanderthals were doing that, they now believe. So it's a very that burial practices are multifaceted across the world and across time. But it seems to be, you know, a really intense desire or need to have some ritual around death. And that the ritual is whether preparing the body and burying the body, or burning the body, or letting the birds scavenge the body. But the death ritual is really, has been for humanity and early humans very, very important. And they, you know, early humans exerted an enormous amount of effort to do that. So you know, they don't know how that arose in our consciousness, but there was a shift. And unfortunately, we've shifted to the commercial model, and it's a business making operation, and they have commoditized or you know, death, and we're living in a death phobic society, at least in North America. And you know, people are finally starting to talk about death and dying and death, and about the rituals. And you know, it does now make, you know, does it make sense to be burying all these bodies? I mean, at one point it would have been from a sanitary point of view and a disease prevention point of view. But I mean, it's thousands and hundreds of thousands of years that early humans were doing this. So it's a pretty powerful drive for in us.
And they buried valuables with the bodies as well. And it's just an interesting study to and maybe it's time to change that, to recognize that it's not useful anymore in this society. I'm not saying we get rid of death rituals. That's not what I'm saying at all. We still need to do the honoring of the dead for the living, the ceremonial part of it, but the commercialization of it is it's appalling, really, how much people spend on funerals, and then they're still in poverty after the funeral focus. It's insane, but that's my opinion.
I think too, burying them in caves and burying them in a coffin, I think you're trying to take that idea of, as you said, having some control, or going for comfort, going for secure. No, you said security. Humans seek security, and even in death, we want the body to be secure from all the wild animals, and just sort of protected a little bit more, as if you're reaching this life a little bit further and into whatever. And you're putting some things with them so they'll feel comfortable wherever. I don't know. It feels like it is a desire to smooth the way for the living, I think, to feel that they have keeping them safe or something like that. Sorry, go ahead.
I think that in my memory, how we've evolved with death, the process of dying in North America, certainly over the years, has been that a person who is in that process is instead of it being embraced, is put aside. There are stories of people in the dying process being put in a single room, not embraced, but put away. And then when the death does occur, then there is a need for a ceremony. And I think, I'm not sure how it evolved, but my sense is that people, it's a change. And in having that ritual, it helps the person that's still alive to connect and continue connecting with that person. It's just simply helpful for them. And but it's interesting that during the process, we don't necessarily embrace it that well when a person is going through that. I think it's gradually changing, but for years we put them in a room and close the door. So it's, yeah, I think we've got mixed feelings about death for sure.
But going back to Rowe's book, my understanding is that he sees a static population without thinking of change, of what may be happening to the environment, for example, just continuing on with their way of being, their way of earning a living, the way of for a country to make its decisions, and not thinking too much yet of consciously changing the way of thinking about life. But gradually this may happen, and people will adopt that new consciousness, and it'll become part of their lives again. And I wonder if this isn't going on all the time. It may be very, very slowly, but don't we as human beings gradually change our way of thinking about life, thinking about death, as we go through our lives and through the different generations? I certainly remember my grandparents thinking quite differently from the way I think about life and death in many aspects. And I do believe that consciousness does change gradually and naturally.
Well, I looked up James Rowe. He's a prof at the University of Victoria. And radical mindfulness, why transforming fear of death is politically vital. And it says here, he argues for the political importance of seemingly apolitical practices, such as meditation and ritual, which was making me think about all the monks in the world and the pacifists. And I guess any of us who try to practice meditation, and not that I'm successful at it, but I think the more you go inward and try to practice that, the more you realize all sorts of things, and that we're all part of one big entity. So you don't find the monks of the world going to war, and you don't find them using a whole lot of resources either. And is this because they spend a lot of their time going inward, so they have a different sort of consciousness than a lot of society? And if we look at Becker, and that we are creatures and we have spirit. And it feels to me like we could have so much sort of emphasis on the body or the creatureliness right now, and we need more emphasis on the spirit in order to get this change. And I wish women would sort of stand up around the world. I don't know how on earth we do it, but to somehow say, let's take a deep breath and think about everything that's going on, and to try to stop some of these conflicts in the Middle East, or everything seems to be escalating, and maybe we need to do a whole lot of going inward in order to change things. Which, I mean, of course, I haven't read this fellow's book, but I find it really interesting, the importance of seemingly apolitical practices, just seemingly apolitical, of meditation and ritual. Could change the world.
Thinking of ritual just for a moment, all rituals that I pretty much have either experienced or just ones I've read about or just witnessed, etc. Everything I know about rituals is about connectivity at the core. That in change that's being demanded, or wherever that is about, rituals that are formed or designed, they're designed to create connectivity in the under the intensities and pressures of potential fragmentation or real fragmentation. In other words, the breaking of the social fabric, the breaking of a traditional fabric of beliefs or myths or systems or your body and changing form and so on. So I come back to the word connectivity, and the other day I was listening to a talk, and the fellows, he's a very high level cognitive behavioral scientist, and he's looking for this really core of what makes human evolution so unique. And he comes down to, he says, it's connectivity. The system is designed to keep connectivity. And then he says, and you look that word up in Latin, and it's religio. Religio. That's what it means, is to stay, and that is the driver. You were talking about the driver earlier. What's that big driver? And I would say the big driver is connectivity. And of course, anything that's a threat to that connectivity that your particular want, that you want to achieve or have, it's easy to find enemies who are causing the disconnectivity. And that's where I think you got wars. And so we will do anything, we will destroy so much. We will sacrifice so much connectivity just because we're so afraid of losing connectivity. That's I think almost a psychotic kind of split in the way we're trying to solve a problem at the same level at which our thinking is already fragmented and split, that causes the problem of the threat of losing our connectivity. And I think that's the same as when you're on the cliff or in this situation of a psychotic episode. You're on the edge of losing your connectivity with things that really matter. One is your own ontological reality in the psychotic case, and the other one is your physical body and your as a physical being could be threatened any moment. So just some thoughts about religio, and as the basis of religion, as you can see, it's nothing to do with religion per se. Religions are kind of forms, right? They're forms that take this drive and work that form and put it into various kinds of cultural or religious types of documentations and other kinds of insights. So what I'm arguing, and this fellow was arguing, is that religio is actually an impulse prior to all religion. It's actually built into the fabric of all life, all beings, actually even the non-living world. The world is not total chaos. So the fact it's not total chaos, even in the non-living world, tells me there's connectivity, there's attraction of molecules to form something, and they want to keep reproducing that. That's what a crystal does, keeps reproducing itself. So it's already there, right? It's like baked into. That doesn't mean there aren't chaotic forces. Yes, there are destructive forces to break those systems apart. But once you get into being a living being, you don't really want to lose that. A crystal might be a little easier to let go of its form to be reformed. And when you're a living being, it's like, I don't want to lose this. It took a lot of evolution to get a living system to stay connected. in a world that is a little rough out there. It's freezing cold, it's burning hot, it has no oxygen all of a sudden. You know, so the world is not totally benign in that way.
Mhm.
But it gets back a little way to the mind body problem, because the body is essentially disconnected. The body is a unit. The body has boundaries and edges. And the mind is expansive. The mind and the spirit, or whatever you want to call it, is not contained by the physical body, but the mind is connected to the physical body because it can't live without the physical body. So it's that whole thing about, am I my mind, or am I my body, or am I a combination of both? And the body, the mind has to protect the body, or the body has to protect itself. And that's where the fear comes in, because without my physical body, I am nothing, but without my mind, I am also nothing. So and the only way we connect with other bodies is essentially through the mind and the spirit and the communication and the conversation, and because we are essentially separate. So perhaps connection, when you're only feeling at the body level, is impossible, because, I mean, other than, the obvious, but and that's perhaps I'm sorry. It gets back to having my heels in the doorway. But maybe that's why women have a greater or many women have a greater understanding of the togetherness and separateness, because we give birth, or have the potential of giving birth, because we have that other person, that other entity inside of us, and we know the separation, and we know that more essentially physically than men have the ability to do, whether we have actually had children or not. The potential for that connection is there. So it's very, very difficult to be in the body and not in the body at the same time. And it's very difficult to be to identify as being your body and be totally connected without that other spiritual and mind connection. And I know that sounds like I'm rambling, because I'm just trying to get my thoughts together, but it's essentially a dichotomy that we can't solve. And maybe that gets to the part of denial of death, and gets to the part of that we need to know that there are things we can't know. We need to know that we don't know stuff. We need to know that everything is random and uncertain, and we need to be able to embrace the idea that really we only have now, and that's it. We have no idea, really, and we have to become comfortable with not knowing. And maybe that's what denial of death is not being comfortable with not knowing. Maybe.
Yeah, I think that's fear of controlling your environment, like just letting go to knowing that there's so much we don't know. But I was going to say to the body bit, but are we separate bodies? I remember a cartoon where it was such a cool cartoon, where the way they animated the people was, the guy, he wasn't having a bad day, and he kept kind of losing his head, would fall off, and he'd have to stick it back on. Things would fall off his arm. And it sounds crazy, and there was another guy talking to him in a little bar, but it just was such a true feeling to how we sometimes go through the day and feel like we're not all there, our body's not all there, or whatever. And another book I'm reading, we are multitudes, we are made of multitudes, talking about how our bodies are really, like, a lot of them is bacteria that are actually part of us. Some of it is external to us, some of it is us. What's me, what's not? Like, it's just our bodies are shifted and shaped all over. Maybe it's how our perceptions, maybe our perceptions trick us because we think this is what we are. But we're really shedding and blending, and we might have like energetic things shooting out of us, but we can't see them. I know. I'm saying they might not be as separate as, they might not be a dichotomy, but you're right. We don't have the brain to really get it. And so we ramble on like I am and sort of half-ass make it up. But yeah, maybe, yeah. But maybe, right? And and a lot of that is just being open to potential and open to change and open to realizing, as you said, that we just don't know.
Yeah.
That's a good way to deal with fear, is be okay with I don't know.
Yeah, and I can't think of, I would love to imagine that any school teacher, in front of a group of grade ones would start the year off with saying, we're going to learn a lot this year. Isn't that exciting? But you know what? We're also going to learn that there's a lot we don't know.
Well, and that's right. And I think, it's back to Don's point about we need sort of a new level of consciousness. And there is, in the evolutionary phase, we are changing, and we have changed, and we're not finished. This is not the end. Sometimes society believes that that the here and now is the end and we've accomplished everything. I mean, we're really just at the beginning, and I'm still going to take that analogy that we are barely out of the trees. So there is there is emergent probability and through evolution, and there is an evolutionary change that's occurring. And the mystery is where it's going to end. We don't know. But there is an increasing, I believe, consciousness. And that increasing consciousness is getting control of your consciousness and being aware of you, sensing and having the external world, sensing the external world, and sitting down, and you have a mind to think through and get more control of, and it's more like an intentional consciousness. I am aware. I'm aware I have an issue. What is the issue? Is it so? Is it really happening? And then, what are the solutions to it? And that's where we need to go. This notion of just meditating your way through problems. You have an intellect that you must use. You must seek out what the underlying causes and problems are and what the solutions could be. And then that's, there's an intellect that's required in all of this. You just can't pretend that your mind, you're being mindful and meditating. And it's a group process. You could call it functional collaboration. Because it's so large and so multidimensional, calling in all of your sciences, that this is a massive, massive undertaking for any change. And just that radical change. Well, what do you want to radically change? We've got all kinds of protest movements. Nothing, some of it changes maybe for the better, and a lot changes for the worse. So there is and I think we are evolving, and really, I would be amazed to see what the next 5,000 years is going to be like, because we have definitely not arrived as a species.
So this author says that a lot of activism and a lot of those actions that people are taking are still based on a fear of death at a deep unconscious level, and that's not producing good results. So I don't think that author would say, I would argue, I haven't read the book, I've ordered it, but I don't think they would be against rational, calculative thought. I think that is very important, but I do think they would say we also can't rely on that without really checking up this inner affective, emotional, feeling dimension of our existence. Because there's a lot of grasping for, securing things in activism. That's what I've witnessed over my decades on this planet. And that's when you start grasping and trying to hold and trying to secure, And it's hard. It's like how you can tell somebody, you know, don't try and secure the rainforest when you're going, rainforest is our breath. It's our, you know, it's our foundation for our oxygen. And you're going, yeah, I know. But it's like if you're coming in with an attitude to rescue it, in a sense of to secure it. One of my Indigenous colleagues who's taught me a lot about the Indigenous worldview has said that his experience, 70 years on the planet of activism, is that he sees activists burning out of every kind because they don't have that spiritual practice. They don't have a recognition that they are not in charge, and they don't have a recognition that you cannot stop everything. They still have the drive that we can do this if we work hard enough. See, if we drive hard enough. Now it's
Well, that's, yeah,
I
and
don't want to
that's
take that
the,
away from people either, because drive is really important. But you can see it's this really fine line, isn't it? It's real art to know how to do that. What were you going to
well,
say?
it's the also wanting the change now and not looking that this change will take decades or maybe 100 years to 200 years.
Yeah, I agree.
So that's the burnout, is expecting that radical change will occur within the next 10 years or 20 years or my lifetime, and it won't.
Thank you. What a great place to end this session. We'll just all say good day to all our viewers, and we'll look forward to your comments. And for the rest of you, we'll click off here, but then I'll send you a link in about 5 minutes. So have a coffee break or tea break or water break. See you soon.